Hello folks, my name is Donald Standeford and I am back. I have been putting out quite a few of these podcasts. I try to do my best with each one because I don't want to put out something that people aren't going to like, and I want to please customers as much as I can. I feel that God wants me to do this. I'm a writer, actually. I have books on Amazon.com. I have my Alexa just answered me because I got her set so that her name is Amazon. Anyway, so she's answering me. I'm totally a fool for these technological gadgets. I said once that I would never have one of these Dots or Echoes or Lexia in my house because I don't like my privacy. I didn't want anybody spying on me, but it seems that the privacy factor has been set aside for the fun of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Alexas in our house. I was watching a horror story of this guy whose boss called him all the way from Seattle, which was a long way from his house, and told him to unplug all his Alexa gadgets, his Dots, Echoes, whatever you want to call them. And they did it, and they said, "Why do you want us to do that?" He said, "Because your Alexa sent me one of your conversations." And she said, "Well, how could that be? That doesn't sound right." And he rattled off the conversation for her, exactly what they'd been talking about. And this was the guy's boss, and they were joking around, so they got a little crazy. Anyway, I don't think the boss was upset. They must have kept from making him mad, but I've still got these things in my house, and they're handy. I read a lot. I listen to the news a lot. I'm kind of a freak when it comes to that kind of stuff, and I'm a freak for research. I'm working on a novel that is based on a true story loosely. My wife, I was working on her biography, her mom's actually. She had a very interesting story, and I felt like God had placed me in this family. I've been married to Joyce, lovely woman, my wife, for, since 1997. Must be about 23 years. I need to get her a Valentine's gift. Anyway, I felt like I had enough time to get to know Joyce's mother. We didn't always get along, but she was an interesting person. Very headstrong, set in her ways. After I had surgery one time, I remember we lived in a park right across the street from her, and I would go out and jog after my surgery, and she would call my wife. "He's out there jogging. He's gonna get hurt." So she liked to tattle on me. I actually talked to her once about creating a detective in one of my stories, and she told me some of her experiences. She was never a detective, she was a bus driver, but she had kind of a natural bent towards being a detective. In her spare time, she actually did a lot of things that a detective would do. She was sharp, and she would catch on if somebody was lying or up to no good. She never feared confronting people. I remember once we were at one of her large yard sales, and one of Joyce's nieces sold an item for a low price, and the lady walked off with it. And Darlene, my wife's mother, the interesting one, she came out there and she said, "How much did you sell that to the lady for?" And my wife's niece said, "I don't know, $4. And Darlene said, $4? We could have got $20 out of that thing." And she took off and chased the lady down and got it back, gave her money back. I don't think she ever sold that thing. She's been gone for a few years now. But I created a character, and my wife's mother was named Darlene Best. And I created a character who is sort of a detective and also she can fight. And my wife thinks it's crazy because she doesn't, I don't think she sees her mom as a karate expert or a boxer, which my character is. But my character is larger than life. She hangs around with serial killers, interrogates them in prison. She's not a cop, but she could have been. She's not afraid to go after danger. In fact, I named her, my wife's name was Darling Best, and I named my character Darling Dare. Darling Dare, she's very competent. She can overhaul an engine. She can drive a fast car. In fact, she does drive, and she races and chases a kidnapper and catches up with him and tries to get the baby he's kidnapped. So Darling Dare, she's attacked in an alley by a guy with a gun, and she tries to subdue him. I won't tell you if she is successful or not. She's a Christian, though one of those Bible-believing, get everybody saved Pentecostals. Her husband's a crack-up. She does the fighting in the family. He's kind of a fun guy. Anyway, that's my Darling Dare Enduring book. If anybody wants to get the book off of Amazon, I'd appreciate it if you would have my back there. I think you would like the book. And we also have available, besides the Kindle book, an Audible book. My narrator is named Dan Carringer. Very good narrator. I have quit working on the book for a while. I was working on a trilogy loosely based upon Joyce's grandfather, who came out of nowhere. Nobody ever knew where he lived or where he grew up. He called himself Smith. Everybody knew that he had left his family and had never gone back. And whenever anybody would ask where he had grown up, which Darling Best, my mother-in-law, did several times, he would just get upset and climb up. He never told anybody to his death. His wife knew, but she never told anybody either, to her death. So that was a mystery when I first met Joyce, and we would always talk about what was it that he did. Was he like a Billy the Kid or something, running from the law? He just appeared in California out of nowhere. Married, had a close friendship with his wife's brother. There's a whole there's a whole family that is descended from him, big one. But nobody ever knew where he came from, and all we had was stories that we made up. Well, right before my mother-in-law, Darling Best, died, she had a little genetic test, and they finally found out that he came all the way out to California to live from Tennessee. He had disappeared, and nobody ever knew where he was after that. His father had been abusive towards him, had hit him with a block of firewood several times and messed him up bad. He had taken off during the Depression to ride the rails, and there were hundreds of thousands of people riding the rails during the Depression, and even little kids whose mothers would take them to the train tracks and tell them to hop a train and try to find something to eat because they couldn't feed them. There were also child molesters taking advantage of kids. The kids would gang up in gangs to try to protect themselves. And Darlene's father, and she found out, I don't know how much she knew before she died because it was pretty close when they found the genetic test, due to her niece, Darlene's niece. But there was a lot of ways that they were able to recognize who he was, because when he got to California, never seen his family again, he had named his kids after the names of people in Tennessee that where he grew up. So it's pretty easy to tell that, yeah, he was the one that he was the Carl, I think, or Frank, and he was definitely the one. He had even given himself a new birthday that I think was after his grandmother on her birthday. And there were so many different ties that he had. He must have had some memories because he named one of his kids after somebody in his family. And there were a lot of connections. He had gone riding the rails with his brother, Carl, I think. His brother, at least I'm not sure, I was using his real name for a while, and I think I changed it. And now I'm calling them Frank and Carl, the brothers. They had went off to ride the rails, and then Carl had gotten tired of it and went home, while Frank, who had vowed never to go home, instead of going to Tennessee, went to California and started a family. Never saw his family again. Hard to do, I would think. Just take off and never go back, especially when there was extended family he got along with. But that's what he did. We even seen a postcard that the family had. He had stopped in Colorado, Denver. He had picked up a postcard. He wrote on it that he was not ever coming back and sent it to his mom and dad. And that postcard survived the years, so that when we found out who he really was, we were able to see that postcard, which was kind of nice. It was kind of strange, being able to see what happened after always wondering your life, just what went on there. Of course, I embellished quite a bit. I made Carl into a tall, lanky gunfighter, one of those old West type gunfighters, because his grandfather was a famous gunfighter. And then I made Frank a short, 5'1", barely 100 pounds, who hated the outdoors, but he wanted to be a gunfighter too, but he had no ability. But that's all going to be in my book. The Darling Daring books are available right now. I do have a small book with Murder at Mountain Creek, which is about the two brothers, but I haven't got more than 2 chapters published on it yet, and it hasn't been put to Audible. But The Darling Daring is on Amazon if you want to check it out. I think it's a good book. I don't know. Anyway, I am a student at heart, and I think as writers we all should be students. To give you an example, what I'm interested in, I go all the way with it. When I was a young adult, I noticed that they were coming out with computer games more and more, and they were getting better and better. And I vowed, I had some little experience with them, but I vowed I wouldn't get caught up into games. I do play games that have an educational value, and I was a chess player in high school, pretty good one. But I decided, instead of these games that I saw other people working constantly busy with, I decided that I was going to do anything that bettered me. If it didn't better me, I didn't want to do it because I didn't have time for it. So I have become a student about anything. Right now I'm trying to find out about this thing that's going on in our nation with this election fraud, Donald Trump. There's prophecies to think about. Donald Trump was called out in 2007 by name, and Kim Clement predicted that he was going to be president, and he had prophecies between 2007 and 2016, and 2 weeks after Trump became president, he died. But Trump recognizes, I know he does, because he went to Nevada before this election and talked to the prophets there. God said there will be no more corruption in the White House. I don't even believe Biden's in the White House. I believe the military's in charge. I believe they locked him out. They won't let him have the nuclear football, so I don't know what, he must carry some bag around with underwear in it or something. Um, they won't let him fly on Air Force One. So I think he has a stunt double who runs around climbing up the steps of Air Force One after arguing with the guards, and then probably exiting after they turn the film off. He does his Oval Office in Hollywood on a set where they filmed a movie called Dave in Castle Rock. And I think he wanted to be a fake president. He invented the office of president-elect to try to push his way through after cheating in the election. And when he appeared, he had plaques, medallions behind him that said Office of President-elect, even though he wasn't at that time president-elect. And there'd never been an office of president-elect before. Ironically, Trump now came out with an office of ex-president, so Biden's a crack-up, and so are all the people with him. Anyway, I am a student at heart. I have studied these prophecies and found them to be fascinating. Kim Clement prophesied that Trump would was his David, and would cast the stone that took down the giant of socialism. This was back before any of this happened with this socialism. He told Trump he would win, and I think he even gave him a plan for not being trapped in socialism. There were other prophets that said, if we stayed on the course we were in, and if Biden stayed in, which I don't think he will, by 2006 we would be as enslaved as China is right now. We would have a one world government. You wouldn't be able to buy or sell without the mark on your hand and forehead. They really want this one world government badly. That's why they took all this risks and cheated for the election and made sure they made their way into the White House. Because it was then or never. Trump really broke into their plans. And now, if you wonder what Biden is doing with all those executive orders, what he's doing is he's resetting everything. The opposite of what Trump did. Not because he doesn't like what Trump did, but because he has been ordered to change everything back for an experience that we really don't want to go through. The reason that he's so noticeable is because in the past 4 years we've been through a lot. We've seen our eyes have been opened up to Trump's ability to manipulate the stock market, which according to prophecy and according to the people that know him and his plans, when we get rid of this central bank, the system, and we get rid of the corruption in our society, the judges who won't open the case because they don't want to see the evidence because they know they'll have to rule in favor of somebody that is going to get them in trouble with their blackmailers or going to stop their money flow from the bribes. The whole thing is just sick. Even the Supreme Court, Ken Clement said 2 people on the Supreme Court will step down because of their embarrassment over the situation that is about to occur, and I believe that's a military tribunal. There have been many prophets who have prophesied about Trump. It's a big deal in the church because it's obvious that without God's interference in this, a miraculous interference, being able to call Trump out from 2007, and to be so specific, without that, we would be living in a communist world and enslaved. Imagine that, the United States of America enslaved. I know on Facebook it made me mad when they would stop me, censor me, so I couldn't say what I wanted to say. They would threaten me not to post certain things. Even off of their own website, I'd post something off their own website, and they would threaten to cut me off. But I think my theory, not my theory, but the theory that I agree with is that that Trump was approached by the military because the military had seen that Obama was doing things that were hurting the nation, and they wanted to interfere. But they were apprehensive about it because they wanted it to be obvious that they were doing a good thing and not just taking over the government. And so I think they probably, it's said by some that they went to Trump and asked him to run for president so that, and it all fits. It really does. If you think about how Hillary was so mad when she lost, the Democrats were confounded. Immediately, they set out to impeach Trump. He was their worst enemy. Why? He knew Hillary, and he knew a lot of these politicians when he was a rising star in New York or Florida or Vegas or wherever he went, building buildings, billionaire. He had a lot of friends, and he doesn't have quite as many now, but I'm sure there's still a few of them. And everybody knew him. He went on talk shows. He laughed. He lived. He didn't have a lot of problems, I don't think, in getting along with people. And then he became president. And from that time on, they tried to run him in the ground. Even his wife, you would think they would like her. She came from another country, was successful, spoke several languages, had a career as a supermodel, was now the wife of the president, and all they could do is shoot her down. So Trump was attacked, I don't think, because of himself. He was attacked because of us. Because the deep state or shadow government or whatever you want to call it, the news agencies, fake news, the FBI, CIA, all those three-letter agencies, even the presidency, the executive branch, Congress, the Senate, there are governors all throughout the United States, in places like Georgia and Michigan, perhaps California with Newsom, Oregon. These Democrat governors have become hardened and not very sympathetic. There's a change that's coming, and I don't think it's a good one. It's called the Great Reset, I heard, where bankers are going broke. So they want to create some type of a emergency situation where they can claim to be the only ones that can help. So we end up giving our property to them and submitting our lives to them and become their slaves, merely because we have no other choice, because there's been some sort of war that we lost, or a pandemic, or maybe a solar flare that knocked out everybody's power, whatever. But they were preparing that over a 16-year plan. So when Obama went into office, because I think it started with him, even though I know there was some bad, suspicious dealings going on with the Clintons before that, I believe that it started with Obama, this plan. Now the banking system, the World Bank, who they call the deep state for some reason, they were getting desperate. They've lost a lot of money. They know that the countries are broke. We're in debt up to our ears, $30 trillion and rising. And they know that these governments aren't going to be able to pay back this debt. And so they are trying to seize our assets and take away our freedom so that they can ride on our backs and profit from the work we do. The whole thing is sick. That's what they intend to do. Zuckerman and that Jack from Twitter and whoever, Jeff Bezos and a bunch of Hollywood actors, all these people, they've had turned to sin, and not only sin, but the ones that really know what's going on have sold themselves, if not to the devil, to a success that that takes out of them what is most important, which is our soul, who we are, what makes us act, react. But anyway, I wanted to talk about writing. I got off on this track. I wanted to talk about research today. Now, I have talked in the past about 3 major areas of drama that I wanted to concentrate on because I think they're overlooked. Number 1 is character. You have to have some type of a character, even if the character is the setting, which isn't done very often. Usually it's the antagonist that's the setting, because it challenges the reader, or it challenges the protagonist, the hero. So, the character is the driving force of the story. We don't often see that. Generally, we think of the character as being just a person that we want to detail. We often don't see it, the character, for the power he or she truly has. We take that character for granted, and we don't put into him or her the force and the drive needed to carry out a long story, novel, or something bigger than snippets anyway. Our character should lead and guide us. We shouldn't have to lead and guide it. We should be able to put it together and follow it around and say what it did. And then when we do that for a while, we can try to maybe examine the mind and see how it thinks, because we've already had quite a bit of experience watching it from the outside, and we might be ready to enter the mind, as Virginia Woolf does in To the Lighthouse and Mrs. Dalloway, where her conscious just kind of flows through and lands on any person in the area, so that you got these thoughts constantly going around. Of course, that is a literary book and has merit and has literature, so it's not exactly required for you to be able to write like that. I am, like I said, a student at heart. I think it drives my wife batty because I'm always reading something. Always writing or reading or busy. Now I'm doing this. I had never planned to do this before. I was working on my novel and hoping to get it done so Dan could read it. I've got a lot of pages written already, over probably close to 2,000. I just felt God tell me I needed to get out there and do my part. Well, what is my part? I start out by making these videos that aren't very good. They weren't very good because I think because I was trying to be successful at something I really wasn't that good at. If you want to talk about interesting people, you can talk about Charlie Kirk, who's a talk show host. He's a Christian that I think has been involved in the ministry. He is a good talk show host. You talk about Rush Limbaugh, very knowledgeable right-wing person who was given an award by Trump. He's dying of cancer right now. You got Lars Larson. You got Tucker and Hannity on Fox. There's a whole load of people coming out. God had told me at one time that I should step out and fight the enemy. But when I was working on these books, even though they're Christian-based, they really didn't seem to have the oomph that I thought they should have. I've never been too fond of people who go out and they do things that they aren't all that good at, and then they make excuses.